Many history channels on YouTube are decent enough when it comes to issues not related to socialism. At least as far as I can tell, it's impossible really to be enough of an expert in the amount of historical topics that are out there to really be able to analyze their exact quality. But at the same time, generally, unless you're looking for very surface level interpretations of history YouTube is just generally not where you want to go. It's usually more meant for entertainment than it is to be informative. That being said, there is still something of a spectrum. Here is my very scientific list of some examples of the spectrum of quality for some of the more popular history channels. Of course, sometimes channels whose specific focus isn't on history can make better history videos than most history YouTubers could ever hope to. But there is also, of course, the opposite. Channels specifically focused on history, and yet which consistently manage to pump out some of the worst garbage you could possibly find. And there's one such figure at the very far right, both in this list and literally, who is a particularly apt case of this. That is WhatifAltHist. Many terrible right-wing channels like Casual Scholar can get by just enough thanks to solid production value, but WhatifAltHist has pretty mediocre production value at best and absolutely terrible history at the same time, and yet has managed to garner over 400,000 subscribers, and many of his videos easily break 1 million views. Among some of WhatifAltHist's most classic arguments include the idea that the US is a reluctant empire, or that the, quote, British American world order, unquote, is one of the few empires that cares about morality, or that artists, writers, and teachers use socialism as a cloak to grab power for themselves, or that wealthier people are only anti-racist because they fear retaliation by minorities, or likes to imply that there's something uniquely wrong about African Americans that makes them less successful than other, more model minorities, so-called. Naturally, he barely cites anything he says, and the closest he usually gets to citing anything is to just say something along the lines of, "I read it in a book once." He also likes to make these way overly complex charts that bear some striking similarities to Jordan Peterson charts, but perhaps his single most famous aspect is his very interesting maps, which often seem to be slightly blurry for some reason. But it's probably for the best, because actually looking at what is on some of these maps, oh no. Oh no. More recently, he's even turned to making dating red bill type stuff too. I mean, I feel almost bad for the guy, but at the same time, he spends all day making incredibly racist maps, so it's not exactly bringing all the girls to the yard, as they say. But this guy isn't just something to laugh at. He and what he represents is actually very insidious. He promotes consistently a Western supremacist, pro-imperialist position throughout his videos. And WhatifAltHist is only a small part of a quickly growing trend. Pro-colonialist arguments are becoming an extremely mainstream idea in modern society. Historians like Neil Ferguson were already writing positively of the British Empire decades ago, but this movement is becoming only more and more coordinated and more focused in recent years, and not just on YouTube, but in academia as well. This can be seen in movements like that of History Reclaimed. As they argue, the abuse of history for political purposes is as old as history itself. In recent years, we have seen campaigns to rewrite the history of several democratic nations in a way that undermines their solidarity as communities, their sense of achievement, even their very legitimacy. These culture wars pursued in the media and public spaces, in museums, universities, schools, civil services, local government, business corporations, and even churches are particularly virulent in North America, Australasia, and the United Kingdom. Activists assert that facing up to a past presented as overwhelmingly and permanently shameful and guilt-laden is the way to a better and fairer future. We see no evidence that this is true. On the contrary, tendentious and even blatantly false readings of history are creating or aggravating divisions, resentments, and even violence. We do not take the view that our histories are uniformly praiseworthy. That would be absurd. But we reject as equally absurd the claim that they are essentially shameful. We agree that history consists of many opinions and many voices, but this does not mean that all opinions are valid, and certainly none should be imposed as a new orthodoxy. We intend to challenge distortions of history, and to provide context, explanation, and balance in a debate in which dogmatism is too often preferred to analysis, and condemnation to understanding. So what historical distortions, so-called, are they challenging? What apparently blatantly false readings of history are they fighting back against? Well, let's take a look through their website. Colonialism did not cause the Indian famines, by the token Indian fascists, to give the argument more weight, of course. Or let's look at their article literally titled, In Defense of Colonialism. Or what about the costs of abolition? And yes, by abolition, they mean the abolition of slavery. Make no mistake, this is a far-right movement masquerading as simply being concerned for historical objectivity, when to these people, historical objectivity is simply denying the realities of the horrors of colonialism and slavery. The notion that these ideas are even being spread at all is terrifying, but as Evan Smith argues in his work No Platform, conservatives have weaponized the idea of free speech in order to be able to force through their fascist right-wing propaganda. And of course, the more conservatives can build a platform of literature and the more they can cite from it, the more reinforced their views can become because they can cite those other academics. This is a normal phenomenon in academia. As more work is done on the topic, there will of course be more work to cite, but this can also be used in insidious ways to reinforce fallacious and dishonest ideas by disguising them through citing numerous sources that are themselves dishonest and yet still serve to give an academic, professional sheen. This is what History Reclaimed is attempting to do, and the more a movement like History Reclaimed is able to grow, the more dangerous it will become. If we look to history, it was similarly fascist academics who spoke positively of American Western colonialism that helped inspire the Nazis. Imagine fascists today reading the works from movements like History Claimed and having their racist presuppositions reinforced by fascist manifestos masquerading as academic works. Much the same goes for YouTube channels like WhatifAltHist and Casual Scholar. These channels are helping manufacture consent for imperialism and colonialism and white supremacy, and they are allowed to exist for the same bullshit idea of free speech. The more fascist and imperialist ideas in these videos and books propagate, the more the ideas they spread are reinforced in the minds of their viewers and readers. So what can we do? If you see someone watching these kinds of videos, point out their bullshit. And stop falling for the bullshit free speech excuse that they like to peddle as well. As Karl Popper said, unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society, then the tolerant will be destroyed and the tolerance with them. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, you can like, leave a helpful comment, or subscribe. You can also subscribe to me on Patreon, where you'll get early access to my videos as well as other unique perks. Thank you also to my $8 patron Alexander Bernstein, as well as my $4 patrons Citizen Smith, PieBot5000, Professional Tanky, and Richard Scott Wigton. Thanks for watching.